So the role of the small-scale farmers are so important for the survival of the African and for the food insecurity around the African region.
Small-scale farmers and other rural people are disproportionately represented among the numbers of the poor and hungry, with indigenous people, women, and youth particularly vulnerable. And this is the crux of it, and this is the inequality that I'm talking about. Actually, small-scale farmers, 500 million of them across the world are the ones who mainly produce food for human consumption, all that we eat, and 250 million of them approximately are on the continent. So the rural smallholder farmers represent the interface between humans and the environment, really. They are the linchpin of sustainable and resilient food systems, and they often are really underestimated. And they just face a lot of inequity. They're key to solving world hunger within the means of what we have as planetary and environmental boundaries. Despite small-scale farming systems contributing over half the calories produced in the world, small-scale farmers and other rural people are disproportionately represented among the numbers of the poor and hungry, with indigenous people, women, and youth particularly vulnerable. And this is the crux of it, and this is the inequality that I'm talking about. But small-scale farmers improve their livelihoods, their higher incomes are overwhelmingly injected back into the rural economy, much of it in the form of higher spending on non-food consumables, on equipment, technology, and services to support agricultural production, creating growth and generating jobs. Because they live in rural areas, they're not only providing environmental services for us, and so looking after the water, the soil, and the air that we all breathe, but they're also really dynamizing rural economies and actually stimulating growth. So they're important actors.
So the role of the small-scale farmers are so important for the survival of the African and for the food insecurity around the African region. However, this is getting more and more difficult for them because of the climate change and biodiversity loss. So as they are depending only from the rainfall, when the rain becomes heavier with the flood or not enough rain that create a drought, so their food is impacted because they are rely on those rain, they cannot cultivate, or they cannot get enough pasture for the cattle, or they cannot get enough fish in the rivers. So at the end, their social life become very difficult, and that's where the food insecurity is created. Right, so indigenous peoples play a big role on this food security. So indigenous wisdom, it is the living in harmony with the nature. For example, in my community who are cattle herders, we are nomadic since centuries or thousands of years, and we continue doing this life. Not because we love moving from one place to another one as 1,000 kilometers by feet, because we know that since generation how it is protecting to the ecosystem. For example, in this fragile ecosystem around Sahel. So if you have the cattle and you set them in one place, it's going to create a climate impact like the one we are having in Brazil or in Europe and whatever. But keeping them nomadic, moving from one place to another one, this is a big traditional solution to restore the ecosystem. So those knowledge are very important to protect the environment, to fight climate change, and to have the sustainable food system production. So they are very knowledgeable. So my call on this one, if we do not consider them as experts, we are losing in all the solutions we wanted to give to climate, to environment, and to food security.
It's really interesting because we import across Africa quite a lot of the food that we consume from other continents around the world, and those imports are fairly expensive, and some of the time we actually don't import also the most nutritious forms of food. So this is really quite a pity. And if you look at the continent, one huge problem is that we know most Africans are protein deficient. And we're also deficient in some other important and essential micronutrients. And that is, in terms of human capital, not great for future generations and not great for our young people. So we are essentially shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't invest in making our food systems work. And I also would like to say that the policies have to be in place. So we should automatically import less, and we should encourage our bakeries, all of those agribusinesses that are transforming food, to include a percentage of local nutritious foods. For instance, bread can actually use cassava flour. It can actually use sweet potato flour. Nobody said we can't use that. So I think we really need to look at homegrown solutions around how we can make our markets more responsive and more tuned to the needs of small-scale farmers and the needs of healthy and nutrition diets for Africans in general, even in urban settings.
And we have to also change the narrative. They are an expert. They are not a beneficiaries from the government or from the NGOs or UN or private sectors. They are a partners. They are an expert. So if this narrative change, this is the first step. And then the second step is how in each program, each plan, each policies that government and others going to design can include those people from the beginning. They are the one who's supposed to design those policies, design the program and project, because at the end, they are the one who are implement them and who can make us benefit from all what we are doing. So that's how we can involve them in these three levels, changing the narrative of understanding of these communities. They are victims, but they are solutions. Changing the narrative of those peoples, they are contributing and they are not beneficiaries, they are partners, and changing the narrative on they have to get involved from the beginning. Doesn't matter they went to school or they didn't went to school, they are contributing in our life.